to death. On the riverfront some of the houses was sticking out over the bank, and they was bowed and bent and about ready to tumble in. The people had moved out of them. The bank was caved away under one corner of some others, and that corner was hanging over. People lived in them yet, but it was dangersome, because sometimes a strip of land as wide as a house caves in at a time. Sometimes a belt of land a quarter of a mile deep will start in and cave along, till it all caves into the river in one summer. Such a town as that has to be always moving back and back and back, because the river's always gnawing at it. The nearer it got to noon that day, the thicker and thicker was the wagons and horses in the streets, and more comin' all the time. Families fetched their dinners with them from the country, and eat them in the wagons. There was considerable whiskey drinking going on, and I seen 3 fights. By and by somebody sings out, "Here comes old Boggs, in from the country for his little old monthly drunk. Here he comes, boys." All the loafers looked glad. I reckon they was used to having fun out of Boggs. One of them says, "Wonder who he's a-gwine to chaw up this time. If he'd a-chawed up all the men he's been a-gwine to chaw up in the last 20 year, he'd have considerable reputation now." Another one says, "I wisht old Boggs 'd threaten me, 'cause then I'd know I warn't gwine to die for 1,000 year." Boggs come a-tearing along on his horse, whooping and yelling like an Injun, and singing out, "Clear the track thar! I'm on the war-path, and the price of coffins is a-gwine to rise." He was drunk and weaving about in his saddle. He was over 50 year old, and had a very red face. Everybody yelled at him and laughed at him and sassed him, and he sassed back and said he'd attend to them and lay them out in their regular turns, but he couldn't wait now because he'd come to town to kill old Colonel Sherburne, and his motto was, "Meat first and spoon vittles to top off on." He see me and rode up and says, "Where'd you come from, boy? You prepared to die?" Then he rode on. I was skeered, but a man says, "He don't mean nothin'. He's always a-carryin' on like that when he's drunk. He's the best-naturedest old fool in Arkansas. Never hurt nobody, drunk nor sober." Boggs rode up before the biggest store in town, and bent his head down so he could see under the curtain of the awning, and yells, "Come out here, Sherburne! Come out and meet the man you've swindled. You're the hound I'm after, and I'm a-gwine to have you, too." And so he went on, calling Sherburne everything he could lay his tongue to, and the whole street packed with people listening and laughing and going on. By and by, a proud-looking man about 55, and he was a heap the best-dressed man in that town, too, steps out of the store, and the crowd drops back on each side to let him come. He says to Boggs, mighty calm and slow, he says, "I'm tired of this, but I'll endure it till 1 o'clock. Till 1 o'clock, mind, no longer. If you open your mouth against me only once after that time, you can't travel so far, but I will find you." Then he turns and goes in. The crowd looked mighty sober. Nobody stirred, and there warn't no more laughing. Boggs rode off, blackguarding Sherburne as loud as he could yell, all down the street, and pretty soon back he comes and stops before the store, still keeping it up. Some men crowded around him and tried to get him to shut up, but he wouldn't. They told him it would be 1 o'clock in about 15 minutes, and so he must go home. He must go right away. But it didn't do no good. He cussed away with all his might, and throwed his hat down in the mud and rode over it, and pretty soon away he went a-ragin' down the street again, with his gray hair a-flyin'. Everybody that could get a chance at him tried their best to coax him off of his horse so they could lock him up and get him sober, but it warn't no use. Up the street he would tear again, and give Sherburne another cussin'. By and by somebody says, "Go for his daughter. Quick, go for his daughter. Sometimes we'll listen to her. If anybody can persuade him, she can." So somebody started on a run. I walked down street a ways and stopped. In about 5 or 10 minutes, here comes Boggs again, but not on his horse. He was a-reelin' across the street towards me, bareheaded, with a friend on both sides of him a-hold of his arms and hurryin' him along. He was quiet and looked uneasy, and he warn't hanging back any, but was doing some of the hurryin' himself. Somebody sings out, "Boggs!" I looked over there to see who said it, and it was that Colonel Sherburne. He was standing perfectly still in the street and had a pistol raised in his right hand, not aiming it, but holding it out with the barrel tilted up towards the sky. The same second I see a young girl coming on the run, and 2 men with her. Boggs and the men turned round to see who called him, and when they see the pistol, the men jumped to one side, and the pistol barrel come down slow and steady to a level, both barrels cocked. Boggs throws up both of his hands and says, "Oh, Lord, don't shoot!" Bang goes the first shot, and he staggers back, clawing at the air. Bang goes the second one, and he tumbles backward onto the ground, heavy and solid with his arms spread out. That young girl screamed out and comes rushin', and down she throws herself on her father, crying and saying, "Oh, he's killed him! He's killed him!" The crowd closed up around them and shouldered and jammed one another with their necks stretched, trying to see, and people on the inside trying to shove them back and shouting, "Back, back! Give him air! Give him air!" Colonel Sherburne, he tossed his pistol onto the ground and turned around on his heels and walked off. They took Boggs to a little drug-store, the crowd pressing around just the same, and the whole town following, and I rushed and